My coworker had to tap my shoulder twice before I even registered she was standing next to me. I was in the middle of recalibrating a piece we'd just received, a 19th century writing desk with water damage along the base, and my phone had been buzzing against the work table for the past 10 minutes. I'd been ignoring it. I always ignore it when I'm focused. "Audrey," she said, and something in her voice made me set down the scraper. I looked at my screen. 7 missed calls from my neighbor Sandra. 3 texts, each one longer than the last. The final one just said, "Please call me back right now. Something is wrong at your house." I stepped outside into the parking lot, the November air hitting my face, and called her back. She picked up before the first ring finished. "Audrey, there's a moving truck in your driveway. 2 guys have been carrying furniture out for the past hour. I thought it was you at first, but then I saw them take your grandmother's armoire and I didn't know what to do. I knocked and they said they were authorized." I stood completely still. "What?" "They showed me a paper. I didn't understand it." "Audrey, your couch is in the truck. Your dining table." I don't remember saying goodbye to Sandra. I don't remember walking back inside to grab my bag and tell my supervisor I had a family emergency. I remember being on the highway, my hands tight on the wheel, calling my mother and getting voicemail. Calling again. Voicemail. I called my brother's phone and he picked up on the second ring, which told me everything because my brother never picks up. "Hey," he said, "too casual. Practiced casual." "Owen," I said, "what is happening at my house right now?" A pause. "Look, just come home first. Dad wants to talk to everyone together. There is a moving truck in my driveway. Just come home, okay? It's complicated." I hung up. "I want to explain something about my house because it matters. I bought it myself when I was 28. I've been restoring antique furniture professionally for 4 years by then, doing freelance work on weekends, saving every extra dollar I made. The down payment took me 3 years to put together. I went without vacations, without new clothes, without anything I didn't strictly need. When I finally closed on that house, a small craftsman in a neighborhood I'd loved since I was a kid, I cried in the car alone for about 15 minutes before I let myself go inside. My parents knew how hard I'd worked for it. My mother came to the closing. She held my hand when I signed the papers. That was 4 years ago. The drive from the restoration workshop to my parents' house takes about 40 minutes on a good day. I made it in 32. My father's truck was in the driveway. My brother's car was there too. And so was a vehicle I didn't recognize. Something newer, an SUV with a dealership sticker still on the back. My mother met me at the door. Her expression was the one she uses when she's already decided how a conversation is going to go. Slightly lifted chin, hands clasped in front of her, the look she wore when she told me in high school that I was being dramatic about something that genuinely warranted drama. "Come inside," she said. "Your father wants to explain." "Sandra called me," I said. "There were men in my house." "Come inside, Audrey." My father was in the living room. So was my brother. Owen was sitting on the edge of the armchair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My father was standing near the window the way he does when he's prepared a speech, weight on his back foot, hands in his pockets. "Sit down," he said. I didn't sit. "Tell me what is happening." My father took a breath. "Owen is in trouble. Serious trouble. He's been borrowing money, not from a bank, and the people he borrowed from are not patient men. He owes $65,000. They've given him until Friday." I looked at my brother. He was still staring at the floor. "That is not my problem," I said. "He's your brother. That is still not my problem." My father's jaw tightened. "We don't have that kind of liquid cash. The retirement account. We can't touch it without penalties that would wipe out half of it. Your mother and I talked about it and we decided—" "No," I said. I felt something cold spread across my chest. "No, don't say what I think you're about to say." "Your house has equity," he said. "We listed it. A quick sale, below market. But it'll cover what Owen needs and You listed my house. We still have power of attorney from when you were in the accident. We used. I actually laughed. I didn't mean to, but it came out, sharp and short and completely involuntary. Because I knew something my father apparently did not know. Something I was going to have to explain to him very carefully. And the whole thing was so surreal that laughing felt like the only sane response. Let me back up 4 years. The accident my father referenced happened when I was 24. I rear-ended someone on the interstate during an ice storm. My fault, their insurance nightmare, my hospital stay. I was alone in a city 3 hours from home, and my parents drove up that night, during the recovery, when it looked like I might need surgery and would definitely need someone handling my mail and my bills for a while. My father suggested I give him power of attorney. It seemed reasonable at the time. He was my father. I trusted him. I healed. The surgery didn't end up being necessary. I went home. I went back to work. Life resumed. A few months later, on the advice of an attorney I'd consulted when I was setting up my freelance business as an LLC, she was the one who pointed out that I still had an open POA on file and gently suggested I think about whether I wanted that. I revoked it. I signed the revocation paperwork, had it notarized, and filed it properly. My attorney kept a copy. I kept a copy. It was done. I never told my parents because it didn't occur to me that I would ever need to. It wasn't a statement about trust. It was just responsible legal housekeeping. But standing in my parents' living room, watching my father explain to me how he'd used a legal instrument that no longer existed, I understood for the first time why my attorney had flagged it in the first place. "Dad," I said, and I kept my voice very steady, "that power of attorney was revoked 4 years ago." He blinked. "What?" "I revoked it. I have the notarized documentation. It's been on file with my attorney since I was 26 years old. Whatever you signed, whatever paperwork you gave those buyers, it's not valid. You don't have the legal authority to sell my house. You never had it, not for the past 4 years. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite a word. My father's face went through several expressions very quickly. First confusion, then disbelief, then something I recognized as the early stages of anger. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've made a terrible mistake and is already looking for a way to make the mistake someone else's fault. "Why didn't you tell us?" he said. "Because it wasn't relevant until right now." You could have asked me," I said, "before you put my house on the market, before you let strangers carry my grandmother's furniture out of my home. You could have picked up the phone and asked me, and I would have told you, and we would have had a very different conversation. But you didn't ask. You assumed you had the right, and you were wrong." My brother finally looked up. He looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and something in his expression that might have been shame or might have just been fear. I felt a brief, complicated wave of something that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite the opposite. "Audrey," he started. "Don't," I said. "Not right now." I called my attorney on the way to my car. She picked up. It was after hours, but I've known her since the LLC days, and she answered. I explained what had happened in about 4 sentences. She said, "Don't go to the house tonight. Let me make some calls. I'll contact you first thing tomorrow." Then I called Sandra. "Are the movers still there?" I asked. "They left about an hour ago," she said. "Audrey, I'm so sorry. I tried to. It's okay. You did the right thing calling me. Can you do me a favor and take photos of anything they left in your driveway or on the street? Anything you can see?" She did. She texted me 11 photos. From what I could tell, they'd taken the armoire, both nightstands, my dining table and 4 chairs, and a lamp that had belonged to my grandmother. The furniture in the living room appeared untouched, which meant either they hadn't gotten that far, or the buyers had only requested certain pieces, which made no sense, and suggested the sale had been arranged in some chaotic, improvised way that was going to unravel fast. My attorney called me back the next morning at 7:45. The transaction was, as she put it, not going to hold. The buyers, a couple who had apparently been told this was a legitimate estate sale, had signed paperwork that included a forged representation of my consent and a power of attorney document that had been legally revoked and was therefore void. The title company had flagged inconsistencies late the previous afternoon, which was likely why the movers had stopped when they did. The sale was already being contested. My attorney had spoken to the title company's legal team, and they were in full agreement. No valid transaction had occurred. "What about my furniture?" I asked. "That," she said, "is where it gets into police territory." I filed the report that afternoon. I walked into the precinct, sat across from an officer who looked approximately 19 years old, but turned out to be sharper than he appeared, and laid out the entire situation. The revoked POA, the attempted sale, the removed furniture. He took notes. He asked good questions. He told me property fraud involving forged legal documents was taken seriously in this county and that I should expect to be contacted by a detective within 48 hours. I was contacted in 30. What happened over the following 2 weeks is the kind of thing that sounds made up but wasn't. The detective assigned to my case spoke to my father. My father, in what I can only describe as a catastrophically bad strategic decision, tried to argue that because he was my father and had once held power of attorney, he had acted in good faith. The detective explained, with what I'm told was admirable patience, that good faith does not make a void legal document valid, and that removing furniture from a property he did not have the legal right to sell constituted theft. My mother called me 4 times during this period. The first call was angry. She said I was destroying the family over money, that I was being vindictive, that Owen was in danger and I was worried about furniture. I let her finish, and then I said, if Owen's safety is the priority, Dad should sell his own house, and I hung up. The second call was softer. She was crying. She said she hadn't realized the POA had been revoked, that Dad had genuinely believed he had the authority, that she was sorry about the furniture. I listened. I said I appreciated her saying that. I also said that genuine belief in something doesn't make it legal, and that the detective would be able to sort out what was and wasn't intentional. The third call was from my aunt, my father's sister, who I've always found exhausting, who told me that the whole extended family was devastated by my behavior, and that I should be ashamed of myself for involving the police in a family matter. I told her that when family matters involve someone attempting to sell my house without my consent, they stop being purely family matters. She told me I'd always been difficult. I thanked her for her input and ended the call. The fourth call. I didn't answer. My grandmother's armoire was returned to my house on a Wednesday. The detective arranged it. The buyers had kept the furniture in a storage unit while the sale was being contested, and once the transaction was declared void and the fraud investigation was opened, returning the items was part of the process. I stood in my driveway and watched 2 different movers. Ones I'd hired carry it back inside. It had a small scratch on the left side panel that hadn't been there before. I stood in my bedroom after they'd gone and ran my hand along that scratch for a long time. Here's what I want to say about my brother, because I've thought about it a lot. Owen is 31 years old. He has been making bad decisions since he was 17, the kind that always seemed to get cleaned up by someone else, the kind that taught him there would always be a rescue available. A speeding ticket our parents paid, a lease he broke and my father covered, a loan from the family that was called a loan for about 6 months and then just quietly became a gift. I don't say this with anger, exactly. I say it because I understand how he got here, not because anyone was cruel to him, but because no one ever let him feel the full weight of what he'd done. I don't know what happened with his debt. That's not my story to tell, and frankly, it's not one I was kept informed about. I know my parents eventually took out a home equity line of credit on their own house, the thing they told me they couldn't do, the thing that apparently became possible once my property wasn't available. And I know Owen is still living, still has all his fingers, and still has not called me to apologize. My father sent me a text, about 3 weeks after everything settled, that said, "I'm sorry. I thought I was helping your brother. I should have asked you first. It was 11 words. It took him 3 weeks to write it. I read it several times, trying to figure out what I felt about it. I texted back, I know. Thank you for saying so. That's where we are. Not repaired, not severed. Somewhere in the strange middle ground that exists between people who share a history too long to simply discard and a wound too recent to pretend has healed. I still go to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. We don't talk about what happened. Owen sits at the other end of the table and looks at his plate. My house is mine. I've refinished the scratch on the armoire. You can barely see it now if you don't know where to look, but I know where to look. And some evenings I run my fingers over that spot and remember the parking lot, my buzzing phone, Sandra's voice saying something is wrong at your house, and the particular quality of my own laugh when my father said the words power of attorney, and I knew, before I said a single word back, that everything was going to be okay. There's a scratch on the left panel of my grandmother's armoire that wasn't there before. I refinished it myself. Took about an hour. A little touch-up stain, some careful buffing, and now you'd have to know exactly where to look to find it. But I know. I'll always know. I think about that scratch sometimes when people ask me if I regret how everything played out. If I regret calling the detective, filing the report, letting the legal process do what it was built to do. And the honest answer is no. Not because I don't love my family. I do, in the complicated, worn-down way you love people who have hurt you and probably will again. But because I've learned something about what happens when you let things slide to keep the peace. The peace doesn't last. It just postpones the damage and lets it grow interest in the meantime. What I did right wasn't dramatic. I didn't outmaneuver anyone or play some long game. I just did the ordinary, unglamorous work of taking my own life seriously. When my attorney flagged that open power of attorney 4 years ago, I could have brushed it off. It's just a technicality, my dad would never misuse it. Why create paperwork for nothing? Instead, I handled it. I signed the revocation, got it notarized, filed it properly, kept a copy. That single afternoon of responsible, boring, completely unsexy legal housekeeping is what saved my house. Not luck, not fate. Just the quiet discipline of someone who understood that protecting yourself isn't distrust. It's just being a grown-up. My brother Owen has never called to apologize. I've made a kind of peace with that too, though it took longer than I'd like to admit. Owen has spent his entire adult life learning that consequences are negotiable, that someone will always step in, absorb the cost, smooth over the damage. He's not a bad person. He's a person who was never really asked to be accountable, and the result is a 31-year-old man who still looks at his plate when I walk into a room. That's not a punishment I arranged. That's just what it looks like when choices accumulate over decades and finally have nowhere left to go. My father's 11-word apology sits in my phone still. I read it more times than I've told anyone. It's not enough, we both know that, but it's also not nothing. It took something for him to send it. And I think on some level, he knows that whatever authority he thought he had over my life, over my choices, over the things I worked for, it was never really his to exercise. He knows that now, in a way he didn't before. What I want to say, if any of this means anything beyond my own particular story, is that the 3 things that carried me through were simple and not flashy. Knowing what was right and doing it anyway, even when it cost me something at the family dinner table. Thinking clearly enough, early enough, to have my documentation in order before I ever needed it. And the plain stubbornness to not collapse under the pressure of people I loved telling me I was selfish for expecting to keep what was mine. The armoire is back where it belongs. The scratch is nearly invisible. And I still run my fingers over that spot sometimes. Not out of bitterness, but because I think it's worth remembering exactly how close it came, and exactly what held.